Hello and welcome to this video. So we're now in the shape where we can plot our trades with the stop losses, take profits and the entry points, and we can now get on with looking at how to simulate them. And here we have to apply a little bit of thought to what the correct approach to this might be, because it turns out it's not such a trivial problem to simulate this strategy, and I'm going to explain a few of the issues. When I first see a new strategy or have a new idea or want to try something out, the last thing I'll be thinking of doing is trying to get everything completely exact. Our first aim with this strategy should simply be to have a clue whether it's worth pursuing in detail or not. And that means we don't need to be completely exact. And that's a good job because there are some tricks in this strategy here. What I'd like to do first of all is run something on the 4-hour candles that gives us an idea of how good the strategy might be. In other words, we're going to run something rather rough on the 4-hour candles, and if that doesn't turn out to be negative, then we can probably move ahead to be more detailed and more exact. If it turns out to be completely negative, then there's probably no point in bothering. So the first issue is the 4-hour candle itself and how we want to use it. So imagine we have a trade signal on this red candle here. It's engulfed by this green one with the dots. So we set our entry at the blue, take profit at the yellow, and the pink is the stop loss. The very next candle triggers all of these. So at some point for sure during the 4 hours of this candle we triggered the trade, but we don't know whether the high came after that or before, and likewise we don't know whether the low came after that or before. So this trade could have triggered and stopped out, or could have triggered and taken profit, or could have triggered and neither. We really don't know. So this is a bit of a tricky thing when we're simulating. So what we could decide to do, and what we will do in our simulation, is we're simply going to take the close price of the candle. So what we'll say is that we triggered when we hit this price here. Now that sounds all good, that's okay, we can carry on and just use the close price of every candle to simulate the trades, which is okay to get a rough idea, but that actually brings out another problem with it. When I look back on the strategy on Baby Pips, quite rightly, RoboPip said that there was a 1% risk of the account. In other words, let's say you're risking 500 euros for the trade. That means this 1 here between the entry and the stop loss represents 1 unit of 500 euros that you're prepared to use, and if you win you get then 1,000, because remember the take profit is twice as much as the stop loss in this strategy, so it's a 2-to-1 win-loss. On one side that's really good for a simulation because it makes estimating gains very simple. You can just add up the points, 2 points for a win and 1 point minus 1 for a loss. If you're doing it with pips it becomes much more complicated. However, there's a little issue with this one which I'm sure you've seen already. If we're entering the trade here at the close price of this candle here, well, we've already triggered and gone quite a way above the entry point here. And again, we don't know the timings of the various highs and lows and things in this candle. So for the sake of simplicity, what we're going to do is simply assume that we triggered the trade and then we carried on as normal. So we triggered at this level here and then we carried on. And what we'll do for the rest of the simulation of the particular trade is just purely use the close prices. So example, this candle here, so let's say it closed below the stop. We would then simply say that the stop is where we actually closed out the trade. And then we can keep this 2-to-1, so +2 -1 win and loss ratio for the trades. Now, of course, this isn't accurate, and what it is effectively is a very positively slanted way of doing a simulation. But remember, we're not looking for exact, we're looking for just a clue as to whether this strategy works at all or not. Because if it doesn't come out with a positive result doing it like this, then it's never going to come out with a positive result. There's one more fly in the ointment with the strategy, and that is, let's imagine, I'll just copy this candle here. Let's imagine this one was engulfed by this one. If this trade hadn't triggered yet, then it would now be cancelled, or if it had triggered and we were still in the middle of the trade, so let's say we hadn't actually taken profit at all, so I'll just lower these, then that trade would stop because we've had a new trade signal here, so we've got to put a new buy or sell stop on. And the issue again comes, we're stopping then not exactly on the +2 or the -1, so then we would have to take the close price of the candle and calculate the ratio between the 0 and the +2, or between the 0 and the -1, to understand exactly what our gain or loss was. This also is a little bit of a pain and probably unnecessary at this granularity of 4 hours, so what we're going to do is we're simply going to leave each trade that's opened running until the close price hits either the stop loss or the take profit. So yes, it's not perfectly exact, but we're not looking for exact at the moment. We're just looking for an idea as to whether this strategy could work at all or not. So then back into the notebook, and I'll give you a little bit of advanced warning. We've got quite a bit to do in this notebook, so there will be some copy and paste from my side because watching me make typing errors is not fun for anybody. Later on when we do the sim, we're going to want to look a little bit at the data frames together. So I want to get this horrible set of code out of the way, which we're using to plot the candle chart. So I'm going to select the whole of this cell. Just cut the whole of this cell, and then right at the top of the notebook, somewhere that's more convenient, let's say here, I'm going to type def and plot candles, We'll take in our plot data frame as an argument, paste in all of that code, and then just remember to, now you'll be able to zoom out more than me, but just remember to select all of that code and just tab it across one so it's indented and is part of the function. And then shift and enter, and that cell should be the function defined. The other thing I'd like to do is take the plot colors and the plot columns and just cut those and go right up to the top, and also paste these in above our function definition. So all of the plotting stuff is out of the way up there and we can ignore it. So let's dive in and make some space and think about how in the world we're going to simulate this strategy. So we have from the previous notebook our data frame, which has our entry, stop loss, take profit and all of information. And the way we're going to do this is to iterate through all of the rows in our data frame. So I'm going to type for index row in df.iterRows and type parse here whilst we have a little think about how exactly this is going to work. So we're going to need to maintain a couple of lists. We're going to need to maintain a list of open trades, and we're going to need to maintain a list of closed trades. And in fact, I'll put those in. Each time we recognize a row in the data frame, we're going to look as to whether that row has a trade signal. If it does have a trade signal, we're going to open a trade and place it inside this list. I'll come in a minute to what the trade actually is. So here for now, you don't need to do this. I'm just going to say, I don't know, signal and open trade. What we need to do before this is we need to check any open trades that we have and see whether they've stopped out, or taken profit. If they have, then we need to add them to the add them to the closed trades, and then we need to remove from the open trades. So what we should have then is a loop that says for each row in the data frame, we'll check if we have any open trades. We'll update those trades. So I'll type update here with whatever the new price is. And then whatever trade is open will be set to closed if that trade is closed for whatever reason. And what we'll do is add that then to a closed list or anything that's closed and remove any trades from the open list that are no longer open. Then we'll check for a new signal, open a new trade and keep going. And what should happen is we end the whole simulation with a big list of all of the closed trades from the simulation. There might be one or two still open at the end and we can just ignore those. So that makes some kind of sense. The only issue is, I'll just type parse here so I can execute this. The only issue is obviously we don't have a trade, and that's what we're going to do now. So in the cell above, we're going to write a new class and we're going to call that class trade. And now I'm going to do a little bit of copy and paste here just to keep things moving along, otherwise we'll be here forever. So inside this class, we've seen classes before, we're taking in a row, and that obviously will be the row of the data frame. And now I'll say up front, again, I've said in a couple of videos before, I'm trying to do this in the simplest way possible, not necessarily the most efficient way possible. So we're going to define a few properties on our trade. So the first one is the actual candle in which our trade was signaled. It might not have entered on this candle, obviously, but it's the one where it detected there's a trade signal. We need the direction, which is our 1 or -1, the buy or sell, and we're also going to store the entry price. The next two pieces of information we need are the take profit and stop loss, which we have in our row. And now we have some information that we need to use to try and manage the trades, hopefully. And that is this trade actually running? Does it have a result? And is it stopped? And you'll see how these are used later on. It's a little bit of a hack with these, but we're essentially going to ask if they're not none, and if they're not none, then we know that something has happened. So having set up our trade class, what we now need to do is write a function that's going to be called down inside the loop where we want to update our trade. So if we have a trade, it exists. It might not have triggered yet, so it might not have triggered the opening trigger, so the buy or the sell stop, but we need to update that trade nonetheless. So we're going to write ourselves a new function then inside the class called update. This takes in the current row of the data frame. And then we're going to ask ourselves the question, are we running? If we are, then let's update the current result of the trade because we might have taken profit or hit the stop loss. And this is a function we haven't written yet. We're coming to it. Otherwise, if we're not running yet, but we exist, we need to check whether we're ready to enter the trade. So have we triggered the buy or the sell stop? And we'll start first with this check entry function. So here we take in the row, which we've given here. And now the logic here is quite simple. We simply say if our direction is 1, so a buy, and our mid-close price of the row is greater than our entry point, or our direction is -1, a sell, and the close price is less than equal to our entry point, then we've triggered the entry. So if we've triggered the entry, we're going to set some new properties. We're going to set self.index is equal to row.name. So we'll save the starting index from the data frame that we actually triggered our trade. We're going to set the time, so self.opened is the current row time. And finally self.running is equal to true. Now you might ask yourself, why am I setting up so many properties and things like this? Well, one of the really cool things you'll see later on when the simulation hopefully runs is that you can take these properties as variables of a class and actually make them a row in a data frame. So we can save all of our closed trades and create ourselves a data frame from all the trade classes. So each one of these properties you see here, so running, stop loss, take profit, index, opened, etc., will be a column in the table, and it makes some of the analysis a little bit easier. So that's our check entry. So we come to update our trade. Our trade isn't running yet, so we check the entry, and if these conditions are satisfied, then we are running. We've opened actually on this particular candle. We know the one that we would actually set on, but we opened on this candle, and this was the index in the data frame, which is row.name, of which triggered our trade. So now a slightly trickier one, and that is the updating of the result. So this is called every time we have a row and our trade is actually running. Now, I've mentioned I'm not writing this in the most efficient way, and therefore this code always ends up being a little bit of a pain because you have to know whether you're buying or selling or not. So the first thing we're going to say is if self.direction is equal to 1. So now just a couple of simple questions. Is the close price greater than our take profit, or is it less than the stop loss? Either way, then we can close the trade. So we'll say if row.midc is greater than or equal to self.tp, then self.result is equal to 2.0. Otherwise, if row.midc is less than or equal to self.sl, then self.result is equal to minus 1.0. Otherwise, we do the complete opposite, which I've pasted in here. So if our close price is less than the take profit, so we're in a sell, remember, then we've got the result of 2. Otherwise, if the close price of the candle was greater than or equal to the stop loss, then we have a minus 1. So we have our scores of 2 and minus 1, as I said in the diagram at the beginning of the video. Now remember, we set result to be none when the class was originally opened, and now the result has been set to something that definitely isn't none, and we can use this now to set that the trade is not running anymore and also keep track of what time the trade stopped. So we can say that if self.result is not none, then we can say that the self.running is equal to false, and we can say that self.stopped is equal to row.time. So execute that and cross the fingers a little bit that I haven't made any glaring typing errors, because they'll be difficult to find later on. We can go back into our actual simulation loop and set things up here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to say for OT in open trades, so I'm going to loop through each of the open trades we have in our list. Of course, we don't have any at the start. Call update on that trade, which remember will either update the current price using the row or check if we've triggered. And now remember that we set the stopped is equal to the time, and at the start of the class stopped is none. So we can use that to detect whether the trade has actually closed. So we can say that if ot.stopped is not none, then append this trade to the closed trades. So now we've looped through all of the open trades. We know what's happened to them. They've either triggered, they've updated their prices, or they've closed. They've got a result. We've added anything that's closed to the closed trade. So now we need to remove any of the closed trades from the open trades, and we can do this using good old list comprehension, which you've seen many times now. So indented, remember, inside the for loop, we'll say open trades is equal to x for x in open trades if x.stopped is none. That means any of them where stopped is none, they haven't closed, so that's effectively moving anything that is stopped. The next thing to do then, once we've cleaned everything up, is to actually detect whether we have a new trade or not. So we can say that if the row signal is not equal to 0, so we have a buy or a sell. Remember, we might have some trades that are in the open trades list but haven't actually started running yet. Now these trades we definitely want to remove and ignore because we've had a new trade signal. If I go back to the original inside bar momentum strategy on baby pips, you remember that a trade which is triggered, say this blue line here, we'll ignore the success, but let's say it never actually gets triggered and then we open a new trade. The idea was we close whatever buy or sell stops were placed for the previous one. Now we've already said that if one is running, then we won't close the trade, we'll carry on until that trade concludes. But what we should certainly do is anything that hasn't been triggered yet should disappear. Otherwise we'll have hundreds and hundreds of trades open for the entire length of the candles. I have to say this caught me out when I first was checking this out, because I ended up wondering why some of the trades were lasting for a long time. So what we need to do then in the case of a new signal is we need to use list comprehension again to filter out the trades and only take the ones that are actually running, so they've triggered and they're ready to go. Remember, somewhere up here in check entry we set running is equal to true here if we've entered into the trade. And last but not least, what we can do then is we can append a new trade to our open trades. And that should, I say with ill-deserved confidence, be all we need to actually run the first very rough simulation of the strategy. So I'm just going to hit Shift and Enter. And straight away I've seen I had a spelling error. I apologize. Up there I typed MIC instead of MID. I also typed capital T on time here, which is no good either. Again, an apologies. And just run. Okay, well that ran in way less than a second, which is always good. So what we need to do now is create a data frame from the closed trades. So we should have a list of closed trades. If I just type len and closed trades, okay, we have 305 closed trades, which is pretty good. What we need to do is we need to make a data frame from this. So we'll say that the data frame trades is equal to, and now we can do something really cool again with list comprehension. We're going to say vars x for x in closed trades. Now that actually hasn't made us a data frame. If we look at what it is, and I'll just look at the first one, it's given us a list which is a nice object that represents a particular trade. The problem is it's not a data frame. But pandas, as always, comes to the rescue. We can type pd.dataframe.fromDict, surround in brackets, and then make a data frame. So with dftrades.head, we can see we've got our trades here. Okay, so I'm zoomed out quite a bit here so we can see all the information. I'm hoping that you can see this okay on the video. We kind of live in the age of HD, so hopefully you can see it. It's no longer 240p. And what I'd like to do now is actually check how some of the trades look, because I have doubts all the time, and I just want to do a bit of a sanity check looking at the graph and check that everything's okay. So we have our trades data frame. Let's just take the first few rows of our actual data frame with our signals and everything inside so we can have a bit of a check. And now what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to try and have a look with the plot that we plotted before, which is all the way down here. So I'm going to make some deletions. And this is going to be quite tricky actually zoomed in as much as I am, I've realized. So maybe I'll cut dftrades.head out of there and just paste it inside here. So this bit always fries my brain a little bit, but we need to check these things out, and I'm going to get confused. I apologize in advance already. So taking this trade here, it's the first one on the data frame, so it looks like this one never triggered, which it didn't, so it got wiped out. That's good. Remember, we're working just on the close prices of the candles. So the first one is this one here. That was at 2 o'clock on January the 4th. That's the candle date. 2 o'clock on January the 4th. That's good. And then it says here that we actually opened at the 10 o'clock candle on January the 4th. That's this one here. Yep, that looks like that opened. That's good, feeling positive. And then what happened, we stopped at 6 o'clock on January the 5th. So this is 4th, January the 5th, 0600. And indeed, we closed well above the take profit. And in this case, actually, things worked negatively for us in the sense that we'll have assumed that we took the take profit price rather than the actual close price. So that one worked okay. The next one we have is 5th of January at 1400. Is that this one here? Nope, that one didn't get triggered either because it was a sell. Is this it here? Yep, 5th of January 1400 as the trigger point. So that should have triggered, I guess, at 1400 on the 8th of January. Let's have a look. Here we are, 8th of January at 10. Did I misread the chart? Certainly did. It triggered here. So at 2200 on the 8th of January. So I've had to do a quick edit there because I just confused myself. So I'm going back to where I was. So I've got this one here at the 5th of January. So you might have seen a nasty cut there. I've just had to edit a bit because I just confused myself with all the dots and the colours. So this one here, I've got 1400 on the 5th of January. Where are you? Where are you? Here you are. Okay. And where does it open? It says it opens at 10 o'clock on the 8th and closed at 10 o'clock in the evening on the 8th. Okay. So 10 o'clock on the 8th is here. Opened, it triggered, it did. And then 2200 is this one here. Yep, that closed there. Okay, that one looks okay. Then the next one we have was 1400 on the 8th. I assume that's this one here. Good, that looks okay. Did that ever trigger at all? I think it might have triggered here. Let's have a look. It triggered at 2200 on the 8th as well. Wow, okay, just about. Oh no, of course, the blue dot here, getting confused. I guess this one took profit as well. Okay, they're looking more or less okay to me. What's interesting is the amount of 2s down here. I'm just going to do head and 10 and just see if there are any minuses. Oh, there are, good. So things look all right. Maybe we should take a very quick look at a loss. So we've got the 12th of January here. Can we still see this one? Hopefully we can. And that was, where's the first loss? So we've got 2 o'clock in the morning on the 12th of January. That's this one here. And we can see actually this is quite an interesting case in point with the simulation. So we will have triggered it here. And we'll have actually taken profit maybe as well. We don't know. But the problem is the next one closed down here and the next one closed below the stop loss. So we should have stopped out there at 1800 on the 12th of January. Let's have a quick look. 1800 on the 12th we stopped out. Okay, so my first glance of this is actually things are looking okay. You might have noticed in the talking I've just been doing there are a few cuts and edits. That's because I got really confused with all the colours and the dots and things, but that's because I haven't got enough brain cells. Let's just do one last thing that I'm curious about because I genuinely haven't seen it yet. I'm just going to do this result.sum. Oh, and we can see that we have positive 229. So if you were in theory risking 500 euros loss and 1,000 gain per trade on this, then you'd have been very well up by the end of all this strategy since 2018. Now, of course, the simulation is very, very positively slanted with the way we're dealing with the close prices. However, for me, this would be in real life actually, and I'm quite surprised, I didn't expect this. It would be a reason to go digging a little bit deeper. So here, the next step is an interesting one, an important choice to make. So one choice you might think of making is, well, I'll make a tweak to the trade code and I'll tweak this logic here to adjust the gain and loss according to the fraction compared with the price where we actually close and the 2. So for example, if we're a little bit above, we get a 2.1 and below we get a 1.5 or something like this. This is certainly one option. It becomes a little bit spaghetti in the logic here, but it maybe would give a slightly more refined result. However, I think with a result sum like this, we can be fairly sure that there maybe is something to the strategy, and there's probably no point in carrying on writing code for the 4-hour candles. What we should really look to do next is actually take our 5-minute candles and the close prices, because we can more or less say they're fairly an accurate representation of frequent price data, and we should try to match up all of the prices in the 5-minute candles for each of these 4-minute periods here. So we make a much larger data frame, and then we can iterate through those prices and see how the trades close, enter, stop, and all that kind of good stuff there. And that will give us a much more accurate representation of the simulation. One thing we still don't have in the data is the spread, of course. And we'll put the spread in towards the end once we've drilled down a little more and got some idea whether the strategy is worth it or not. The spread is going to add quite a bit of a complication with this strategy because of the way we're doing it with risk rather than, say, pips. Depending on the spread, your risk instead of minus 1.0 might actually be minus 1.1, and your gain will be maybe 1.8 or 1.9. But we'll cross that bridge much later on if this strategy says that we need to be crossing it because we want some kind of increased accuracy. So that video is a little bit longer than all the ones I'm usually used to doing, but I think it was important to get all this code together and show you how we can go about doing a sort of a rough estimation of this strategy performance. Over the next few videos, we're going to dive into the detail of how to split up all of these 4-hour candles into the 5-minute prices. So thanks very much for watching. I've had quite a few one-to-one emails and some comments. It's all really, really nice, the feedback. I'm glad that people are interested. So am I. Onwards and upwards. Thank you very much.